Hello. So I think in order to be able to teach online or in a blended or hybrid context, I think it's really important to cover the fundamental theories behind learning, because when we understand how people learn, then we can start to think about how we're going to implement that in various settings. Okay, so the things I want to cover in this video are basically three. Okay, I want to talk about constructivism, I want to talk about community of practice, and community of inquiry. So let's first talk about constructivism. Now, constructivism is an approach of how people learn. So let's first compare that to the the opposite way called objectivism. Now, in objectivism, knowledge is seen as an object, something that I have or the teacher has, and the teacher takes the objects and it, gives it or implants it into the student, right? So the teacher, being the all-knower, has the knowledge, gives the knowledge, or passes it on. Okay. Whereas constructivism is where knowledge is not seen to be, given, but the idea is out there and the teacher might present that idea, but then it's up to the learner to kind of, based on their experiences, based on their thought process, how they see the world, how they make meaning out of that idea. Okay, so you've probably come across many cases where you explain something and you expect your learners to understand it, repeat it, memorize it, and spit it back out to you. Okay, but that's not always satisfying, because do they really understand what you're teaching them, or are they just regurgitating what you just said? Okay, have they actually constructed meaning for themselves? So many people think constructivism is a way that people actually do truly learn, is based on what people see through their reality, through their perceptions. How do they construct meanings for themselves so that it actually makes sense to them? Okay, and that's what we should try to do in our activities, is try to have our learners, really make meaningful ideas for themselves, to really understand it in that sense. Okay. Um, so moving on to community of practice and community of inquiry, I remember one of the first things that came up when I was throwing out all of this learning jargon, online learning, how to approach it, how to use different tools and stuff like that. And I remember Michael always bringing me back and saying, listen, we got to think about all this in a liberal arts context, right? We can't forget that we are a liberal arts university. And at first I was like, what are you talking? I have no idea what you mean, because I never really understood what it meant to be liberal arts. So I started thinking about that. I started learning about it, and what I got through explanations and searching what is that liberal arts means that we tend to be a smaller group, that we really want to work together. We want to be a community. We want to help each other learn. We want to discuss. We want to be close to each other, close to our learners. And that's basically the mission of John Cabot, is to be able to learn in this type of way, where we really truly um, get into everything with our students, help them critically think and arrive at solutions, arrive at knowledge. Okay, and I think these two concepts that I've selected can really be used in our liberal arts environment. So first of all, community of practice um, talks about people coming together and doing things together, and it's almost natural when you want to do something, when you want to ask a question, you usually ask the people that you feel comfortable with, that you feel familiar with, your community in a sense, people that think and see and do the same things as you. And I think at John Cabot, we really create that when we start to get to know our students in our class. We encourage them, we talk to them, and having this advantage of smaller groups, we can really do that. And I think that creates a very good environment. Now, taking a community of practice and taking it one step further into learning is where we get into a community of inquiry. So now that we're in these communities, these kind of groups where we feel together, we feel like we belong, okay? We feel like we're a part of something, okay? And from this being a part, we start to circulate ideas among each other. We start to question each other. We start to give comments. We start to reflect on what other people say in our community, right? Whether it being a class, whether it being a working group, okay? And when you listen to the others in your group, when you share these ideas, it helps you construct meaning in your own mind, right? So you might have a thought of how something is, but based on something that somebody else says, it kind of brings you back and says, how does that, kind of coincide, or how does that jive with my thoughts? Is it the same? Is it different? And how does that change my own perception? And that's how I learn. And that's the basis of a community of inquiry. Okay, so these three things, I've selected them because I think they're very important for learning. And I think if we can take these concepts, which you might already do, you might even be constructivists and not even know it. You might not have even heard of this term, but you might be a constructivist, and you might conduct your classes actually in that way, where you actually encourage students to kind of build their own ideas. I'm sure many of you actually already do that, and I'm sure many of you participate in these communities of practice, communities of inquiry, even though you've never referred to it that way. Okay, so we really need to understand what we're doing, and once we understand that, we can take that and see how can we adapt that to an online environment? How can we adapt that to a blended environment? So I think it's really important to understand these fundamental concepts, and once we understand them, we can kind of see what we're doing, and we can take that and transform it into what we need. Okay?